Pats interference is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
Day one of free agency, and we are rolling the dice, recording a podcast when news could break at any second. I have lived my entire day going to the supermarket, quick stop at the gym, looking at the phone in terror I might miss the next bit of news or hear back from someone. Well, we are going to shut the phone off. 20-30 minutes recap what's happened today. Of course, a lot of splashes in free agency. The Patriots standing on the side of the pool, pretty dry, as you would expect. However, they made the first real move of the day before the legal tampering period. One of the worst phrases, like I don't know where NFL marketing is, probably out to lunch in naming legal tampering. But before free agency unofficially opened at noon, they trade Jonnu Smith, re-signed Jonathan Jones, re-signed Carl Davis, reached terms with them, I should say. We're going to get into all that. We're going to start, though, zooming out at a big picture look at the league, because I am sure, without listening to a second of talk radio today, everyone was freaking out about the lack of spending, considering the Patriots had the money, they had the space, and as I wrote today in the Herald, no excuses for not using either of them. So we'll talk about that, get into the Patriots' moves and what's next for them. Of course, always a good time to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel being the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. You can sign up at FanDuel.com/Boston right now and claim your $200 bonus. All you have to do, sign up, put $5 down, get $200 in bonus cash, and use it on bets like I did tonight, actually. Celtics plus 1 point. They hit one shot from the field. You win. Maximum $50 to sign up with our friends at FanDuel. Support the people that support us. If you like the podcast you've been enjoying, give them a try. And of course, bet responsibly. Okay. Like I said, big picture. We are not zooming out just yet, but well, actually we are zooming out. It's the phrase, it's the part of the drinking game that doesn't exist for this podcast. But if there were, me saying zooming out right there, number one with a bullet. Anyway, again, zooming out shot. The Patriots were actually not alone in their more restrained approach to free agency today, where again, I mentioned big splashes. Tremaine Edmonds, 4 years, $72 million off to Chicago. Mike McGlinchey, top Patriots target, supposedly 5 years, $87.5 million to go play in Denver. But largely when you look at this, even though only 7 of Pro Football Focus's top 20 free agents are left, and a little less than half of the top 40 are still hanging around, and just about half on the dot of the top 50 are unsigned, you look at the teams who made those deals. Like I just said, Chicago in Denver. Teams expected to spend. Chicago had the most amount of money. Everyone else in the top 10 besides those two teams, and there are exceptions, didn't do a whole lot. Okay, let's run down this, because the Patriots, as you know, they were in the top 10, have been in the top 10. I was expecting them to make a big move, one big splash around some of these complimentary signings, which is typical for them, wait out the day one of free agency. But they weren't alone in kind of sitting on the sidelines or the side of the pool looking very dry. Let's go down. The Bears, as I mentioned, entered today with the most cap space in the entire league. They get Tremaine Edmonds, a couple of other moves. There's their big splash. The Falcons were number 2. They get Bengals safety Jesse Bates, $16.5 million. Boom, check, big splash. The Texans were 3rd. No big splash. Raiders, depending on what time of morning today, were 4th. They get Jimmy G, needed a quarterback, which 3 out of 4. The Bengals, no splash. They just lost both of their safeties. Patriots, nobody. Sorry, John Jones, you don't count. Arizona Cardinals, also up there, no big splash. Packers, same deal. The Broncos, as I mentioned, got McGlinchey. And the Washington Commanders in that same boat. Very dry. So when you look at the top 10 teams that had the most cap space and some money to spend, none of them really made these big, irresponsible deals. We were almost void of all these deals that you just look and go at that front office. You are living in regret city in a year or two here. It might be Edmonds. It might be McGlinchey. He could throw Juwan Taylor in there. Another starting right tackle who I said in our last episode would be number 1 with a bullet for me in terms of Patriots free agent targets. As soon as $20 million got floated out to his agent and friend of Bill Belichick, Drew Rosenhaus, Patriots were out on that. Juwan Taylor got 4 years, $80 million from Kansas City. But again, you look at 6 of the top 10 teams in terms of cap space, none of them are going all in with signings here. And that's because there are still players to be had. Maybe just a few left in the top 20, but there are going to be bargains to be had on day 2 and day 3 of free agency, when historically the Patriots have been more active, because you get players who overestimate their market. They're forced to sit there. Their price come down. And then the Patriots meet them and get a better chance at value. And except for 2021, value has been the name of the game for the Patriots. And when you have players who sign, again, Tremaine Edmonds, I might have done this deal in the front office. I don't know until it plopped on my Twitter feed. $18 million a year for a kid who's going to turn 25, already been in 2 Pro Bowls, tackling machine, tightened up his coverage, ascending player. But when you hand out that kind of money, the only way to get value out of 4 years and $72 million at a position like linebacker is to have him perennially be one of the best linebackers of the year. You have to stay healthy. You're at the peak of your powers. You got your head on straight, and you're playing within a good scheme fit. So it's unlikely that you squeeze out, from this number 1 leading contract, the best linebacker in their league. There's only one of them. There's only one guy that can be true of them at every single position. If Tremaine Edmonds is not that guy, you're not getting really good value on that type of deal. However, if you sign, like Jonathan Jones did, a deal where you are, and I have the numbers here, 31st in terms of total value for cornerbacks and 30th in total value, 21st in average annual value for a corner like Jonathan Jones, those are rankings where, put together your best cornerbacks in the league, the Patriots could get value. So that's the name of the game for them. That is the thing to keep in mind. As much as I think they still could spend and get Jakobi Meyers, make some sort of, again, splash, to use another word that we've been repeating. But for now, they've been handling their internal business. And that's what this free agency, through almost 12 hours is really about. So I mentioned off the top, Jonnu Smith was their first move. They cut ties with him less than an hour before the legal tampering period opens at noon. The deal here was, if you have been listening to the Pats Interference podcast, this was a trade I pitched as something that I thought would be outlandish. Now, my version had the Patriots attaching a draft pick to get off of Jonnu Smith's contract. I thought there was no way in hell they could get off of that money, which was going to be a top 2 cap hit for them, around $18 million this year and next year. Instead, they get a 7th round pick from the Falcons and head coach Arthur Smith, with whom Jonnu was back in Tennessee. He was the offensive coordinator for the Titans. Jonnu's 2 best seasons before he comes to New England. Head coach in Atlanta says, we'll take him on. And Jonnu's going to restructure that contract. I think the restructuring probably made this as possible as their previous connection, because just no one is taking on the remnants of that 4-year, $50 million deal that he signed. And Jonnu, the last 2 seasons, as we've covered, hasn't even crossed 300 yards receiving in a single year. So the Patriots get a 7th round pick back. They don't give up any picks. They create about $4 million in cap space this offseason. It's fine. It's whatever. It's not going to prevent you from making any moves. It'll help certain decisions along later, but it doesn't seem like they're in a rush to use it. They are also going to free up money next year and take on a cap hit north of $12 million this year. And so what this says is the Patriots viewed that $4 million in cap space in the shrinking margin of error with the rest of their room, considering that dead cap hit was triple the amount of space that they opened up, or close to it, that it was better to have him off the team, off the roster, off their books, and get that little bit of space than to have him here. So that was a decision there. I think it was good business on their part. There was no real ceiling, wasn't a good fit, wasn't working out. As I've said many times, probably a better player in theory than in practice. Now, on the opposite end of that spectrum, you talk about a player better in reality than you would think of him as just like, oh, Jonathan Jones, whatever, slot corner, undrafted kid at Auburn. Okay, so as I mentioned, 30th highest paid corner in the league now by total value, 21st by average annual value. He gets 2 years, $19 million, according to a source told my friend and colleague Karen Garigian. $13 million of that is guaranteed. Those are numbers and rankings that are fit for a player of his caliber. Okay, solid number 2 corner. He brings value as a proven nickelback. He can part-time at safety. We'll get to that more later. He's always on special teams. He's healthy. He's dependable, forcing a turnover every single season of his career. Good guy. It's also possible that the Patriots are paying for Jones past the peak of his career. He turns 30 in September. Okay, he had a career-high 4 interceptions last year when he moved to outside. Ideally, they don't run it back with Jonathan Jones and Jalen Mills at outside corners because they were just overmatched against the best receivers in the league, including one that lives in your division and has a habit of smoking you every single December and January, and Stephon Diggs. But the contract's only for 2 years. So if you get a lesser version of Jones moving forward. And there is a chance he replaces Devin McCourty, I think, at free safety. Devin, of course, retiring on Friday, because he's the most experienced player, not only in the secondary, but in the entire defense now. He still runs with extraordinary speed, probably around 4.4. He tested 4.3 coming out of college. So he can make the calls, he can cover the space. In worst case scenario, with a guy like this who's high floor, can serve all those different roles, he's a utility player. Like, he adds depth at outside corner. Marcus Jones gets hurt in the slot, where I think he's going to start next year at nickelback. He moves right into his old haunts there. Safety if you need him. All these different positions where that adds up fairly to about just under $10 million per year. If you had a player, 3 different players who could do those positions, instead you're paying for just one. And he's someone who's durable, he's versatile, he's got ball skills. The leadership part is obviously valuable to them. So there were better corners on the market. If I were the Patriots, I'd rather have someone like Cam Sutton from Pittsburgh, who we talked about last week with Phil Perry. He went to Detroit for about $11 million a year. Not as versatile, very smart player, scheme versatile, a little bit younger. But the Patriots know what they're getting in Jonathan Jones. He can plug any hole in your secondary. He might be your next free safety, where instead of spending all that money for Jesse Bates, you just move a guy in with the speed and the smarts to handle it. I'd say it's a very good deal for them. Not a great one. I give it about a B+. So Jonathan Jones is back. So is Carl Davis. Source texted me this early afternoon that he's coming back. They're working close to a 1-year deal. Carl Davis, the Patriots signed from the Jaguars practice squad of all places. Back in 2020. He's stuck ever since, rotational run stuff for 6.5 through 20. He's playing about 20 to 25% of their snaps per year. Only missed one regular season game in the last 2 seasons, which matters when you've got a small role. You really have to show up for work if you're not going to be asked to do a whole lot. Did have 3 penalties last year. Didn't bug them, obviously, a whole lot, including one bad offsides penalty, but he's someone they can depend on. I think he's a player at this point in his career would rather stay in one spot, very close with Matt Judon, actually, but he's bounced around Jacksonville, Cleveland, Baltimore. I want to say maybe a stint in Indy. But this is a kid who was the 3rd round pick, thought he might have a real big career in Baltimore, didn't pan out, but he's sticking around here in New England for another year. I think it's a fine deal. We don't have the financials yet, but when you look at his history of contracts, like everyone knows, Carl Davis is not breaking the bank. Last bit of news before we get to what's next for the Patriots tomorrow, provided nothing has happened just yet. Andre Dillard says no. According to ESPN, Andre Dillard, who's a backup in Philly after being a 1st-round pick in 2019, picked the Titans over the Patriots. 3-year deal, $29 million. Don't have the guarantees off the top of my head. But it's interesting the Patriots would target someone with a history of injuries and inconsistency. It wasn't even starting last year, which is not a knock on him. I don't know how many tackles, aside from the ones in Philadelphia, could have actually started for the Eagles, best offensive line in football. But someone that the Eagles were okay to part with. And again, has a history where you just don't, this is not a dependable player. And having, rostered and depended on Isaiah Wynn and Trent Brown the last few years, you'd think you'd want a rock of stability. Why I thought they might pay as much or close to that Juwan Taylor got. Anyway, they don't want to pay this much for Andre Dillard, who goes to Tennessee now. He hasn't started a game since 2021. They've already missed on the 2 top right tackles I mentioned, McGlinchey and Juwan Taylor. Right now for them, and it's unclear where Dillard would have played. I think they preferred him at left tackle, but he's a really athletic kind of kid that is gone to both sides. It's almost down to Caleb McGarry as far as starting caliber tackles still left in the market. You could throw Orlando Brown in there, but I talked about with Phil, he's a guy who held out just to play left tackle. He wants $20 more million a year. I don't think they're going to pony that up. I just have him so far out of mind at this point where McGarry doesn't fit the profile. Another former 1st-round pick, had his 5th-year option turned down. He's a much, much, much better run blocker than pass protector, but is coming off of a career year in Atlanta where last year's pressure rate, they double-checked today, was only 3.6% pressure allowed on passing snaps. Pretty good. But, again, those downs matter so much more. 3rd and 7, 3rd and goal, any obvious passing situation in a comeback, those multiple drives, you need to be able to hold up one-on-one. And we've heard Matt Groh already say, the first job for that tackle is keep the pocket clean. If you can't do it, I don't know how much the Patriots are going to invest. Of course, they could still address this position of the draft. I just still think they need to sign a veteran, someone at least a swing tackle to compete or be ahead of Connor McDermott. Then you have Trent Brown, possibly a rookie starting on the right side if you draft one of the 1st round. They'll have plenty of options. maybe even day 2. But right now, what we know is it's not going to be Mike McGlinchey, it's not going to be Juwan Taylor, and it's not going to be Andre Dillard. So the Patriots feeling a little bit of pressure here. Still plenty of money, still plenty of cap space, and that's where they are. So what's next? Jakobi Meyers. I wrote today was going to be the first domino. I meant that more in kind of like the bigger picture sense. Maybe not so much timing, but as far as, the player with the most influence over what the Patriots are going to do, he's still out there. And personally, unless I'm missing a notification right now on my phone, which I am not regarding Jakobi Meyers, the longer this goes on, better I think it is for the Patriots, because he's not getting some sort of deal to blow him away, it seems. Okay, maybe he did. Maybe he just needs a night to sleep on it. But the instance where I outlined, where it just takes one crazy bidder to throw the market completely off course, doesn't seem to have materialized. So if the Patriots are close, which they always intend to be, what's your top offer? If you want to come back, we'll give you a little bit less, and we'll bank that your time with us will bring you home. That seems to be very much in play. Now, I do think he'll have several suitors. Houston, ton of money. Atlanta, his hometown, ton of money. The Raiders are still out there. The Bears could use a receiver for Justin Fields, even though they're starting to add, but that should be a run-heavy offense. Jakobi, one of the better run blockers among receivers in the entire league, and just a steady, dependable number 2. So I would still look for those teams. Again, Houston hasn't even made a splash. There we said it again. Yet, and would be a very, very good fit down there, of course, with Nick Caserio. So TBD, he's really the only in-house free agent. You could talk about Damian Harris or maybe Jabril Peppers, but I think they really need to take care of next. Clearly, their focus has been, let's address our in-house free agents, know where we stand, re-signing, Raekwon McMillan last week. Before that, James Ferentz, obviously Carl Davis, Jonathan Jones now. If Jakobi Meyers comes back, it's a big win for the Patriots. And I think right now, not only should they be in play, but the money should be palatable for them. And if he walks for 14, 15 million, something that's well within their reach, for, again, an ascending player whose best football should be ahead of him, that's a real problem. Because, again, there are no excuses now as a team that ranked 27th in spending the last 3 years in terms of just real cash money out the door, and is scheduled right now to be in the bottom 5 and next season in terms of cash spent on the roster. They've got to compete. If you want to compete, you got to spend some money. The other part of what's next, tight end, suddenly a big need. I mocked Oregon State's Luke Musgrave to the Patriots in my first 7-round mock draft a couple of weeks ago. I'm feeling even better about that pick as someone day 2 athletic player. We're not going to get into the draft right now, but the Patriots could theoretically sign someone like Dalton Schultz, someone that I wouldn't totally expect to be available or on their radar, but as it is right now, could be. You've also got Austin Hooper, Hayden Hurst, guys who are two-way tight ends in a way that Jonnu Smith couldn't be. Even if they're not as explosive, they're a little bit higher floor. You're not going to have the debacle of Jonnu Smith. Now, if I was betting on what the Patriots would do, I would bet that they will probably draft the tight end. And if I was going to bet on who they're going to take at tight end, I would do so at FanDuel, who, as I mentioned, new exclusive wagering partner here at the CLNS Media Network and of the Pats Interference podcast. And if you live in Massachusetts, you know the wait is over. Okay, you got bombarded with ads on Friday when live betting was finally open. Come bet at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because it is live in Massachusetts, and new customers in Mass can get into the action with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you just put down your first $5 bet. So go to FanDuel.com/Boston, where you can bet on the Pats, Sox, Celtics, Bruins. It could be the money line. You could dabble on the point spread, player props. You could even get into March Madness. Look, I went to UConn, very proud. There's a UConn flag over here to my left. When I'm sitting in my office, I will be betting on UConn to win every single game responsibly. But if you have a team you think is going to pull off an upset, you want to win more money than you could in a bracket pool, jump into FanDuel. Every single game is going to be there with not only the money line and point spreads, but updated live money lines and point spreads as the game goes on. UConn goes down in the first half. I know I'll be jumping on that. So don't miss out on your chance, even if you just want to put down $5 to get $200 for yourself. Again, that's FanDuel.com/Boston. Make every moment more on America's #1 sportsbook. Must be 21 plus and present in Massachusetts. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as a non-withdrawable bonus bet that expires in 14 days. Restrictions do apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Hope is here. Gambling helpline ma.org or call 800-327-5050 for for 24/7 support. Okay, let's wrap this up with a mailbag. Shout out to everyone who jumped on this because I think I tweeted this no more than 26 minutes ago. Any questions here at the end of day one of free agency? Again, if this goes up Tuesday morning and we have missed some news, it's the nature of the business. I'd rather give you some content now. I can get to your questions via Twitter if you'd rather an answer then, if the Patriots do it from Jakobi Meyers, Caleb McGarry, or whomever. But this is the information we've got now. I will have another episode, at least one later on this week, but I think we'll wait a little bit for some more news to accumulate, have another guest on. As I mentioned last week, talk some Celtics. Not this week, middle of free agency, but next week, absolutely. Okay, on to the mailbag tonight. Gucci Bucket Hat, long time, Gooch, since you wrote in. Quote, why are we allergic to acquiring elite talent to compete? Obviously talking about the Patriots, obviously upset about the lack of splash. As I mentioned, this is something that is not unique to the Patriots at day one. I think this day one of this free agency period is relatively unique. Again, when you have the top 10 teams at cap space and more than half of them are going, yeah, we'll wait this out. Like, A, those teams typically stink. B, they have obvious needs that align with the market, like the Patriots. And instead, you have teams below them in the top 10 leapfrogging them. So again, it's part the market, it's part needs, it's part the Patriots approach that, again, seeks value. And when you're looking at value, you're most likely to get that with mid-level veterans who are signing for less than they expected, where they can outperform that contract. And if you sign, somewhere among the average contracts among linebackers, if you have an above average year, the Patriots squeezed out that value from the player that they signed. So Jonathan Jones, if he's in the top 30 among corners, gives you value. Carl Davis still does his thing at minimal money. All he has to do is not be among the worst defensive tackles in the league, and that's their approach. So they're not allergic to acquiring elite talent. They just see that approach of, there's a smaller chance we'll get that production out of someone like a Mike McGlinchey, who is being paid like a top 10 right tackle, hasn't ever played like a top 10 right tackle, and especially in pass protection. Even Orlando Brown's not really in the solid top 10 among all offensive tackles, and that's a guy who's certainly going to be paid like that. So again, they had a corner who's available, in-house. They opt to re-sign Jonathan Jones. They could have gone after Jamel Dean, who actually signed for a lot less than I would have expected for him. It was 4 years, $52 million. That was a player I would have rather had at that money, though it appears he might have taken a hometown discount as a Florida native who comes back to play for the Bucs. But when they have a safer in-house option, it's a little bit cheaper at a position of need like corner, they go with the known commodity, again, somebody who can play multiple positions. Receiver, again, in-house option, Jakobi Meyers. They are in contract talks with Jakobi. We'll see how that goes. Offensive tackle market, they just see, it's not even necessarily elite talent there. So when you look at their needs, there's just not an exact match of, okay, he's top 3, top 5 at that position. We'll pay for that. It's a market flush with above average talent, maybe not elite, if that's a long way of answering your question. So next question. Speaking of elite talent, Dean asks, can the Patriots trade for DeAndre Hopkins without giving up too much draft capital, and how? So DeAndre Hopkins, for all the talk about his market, is still out there, still in Arizona, still in the Cardinals, who have been more open than most teams about, hey, we want to trade this guy. I've talked about him. I've been in favor of making that deal. But I think the fact that the entire league is waiting this out, you don't have one team jump on him, says a whole lot about what they see his value is right now at $19.1 million, which is the salary you would be inheriting if you acquire DeAndre Hopkins. And apparently, the discussions is centered around a second-round pick. So that would be the answer to your question. Maybe it's a third. Maybe it's a third and a future 4th or 5th or something, a combination that could bring you into the value of a second-round pick without actually having to give one up immediately. So they could do it. Again, my understanding from talking to people inside and around the team is not even me. They would be stunned if the Patriots really get in on this. And the reason really is, a pillar of Belichick's roster building philosophy, which he took from Bill Walsh in the Niners in the 80s, is you'd rather be out on a player a year too early than a year too late. And when you look at DeAndre Hopkins, it feels like you would be adding him a year later than you would want to. Again, this is a guy who's never really won through separation. It's contested catches, excellent route runner. He's got all the requisite traits, but 11 years in the league, he didn't crack 100 yards in a single game after Halloween last year. And yeah, he came off the suspension, but he was fireworks in those first 2 games. Nothing since. And he did have Kyler Murray for about 6 weeks until Murray tore his ACL against the Patriots in December. In that game, Hopkins also only caught 7 balls for 79 yards, mostly empty calories. They didn't shift a lot of defensive attention in his direction. And so all of those things say to me, yeah, he's a good player. But when we play the clip of DeAndre Hopkins getting all this love in person from Belichick, like, it doesn't really mean a whole lot at the negotiating table, because otherwise the deal would have been done. They would have brought him in. So again, I think he's the value he would bring, at least for this upcoming year, would be worth it. But the rest of the league seems to disagree with me. Maybe you, Dean, too. But that's really why, the market for him is lesser than we think. And right now, it could be even lower than a second-round pick, considering the player and the contract. Okay, the last one from @CXLOZ. Quote, it seems like the Patriots aren't looking to spend big. Who are some under-the-radar guys you think they might aim for to fill positions of need? So we just covered some positions of need. Receiver, obviously, offensive tackle, tight end, I would throw in there now, in corner. So let's just run down. Receivers, these are not so under the radar, but again, given their pressing need, especially if they lose Jakobi Meyers, you need someone who can at least start or has shown the potential to start. I would start with a guy like Allen Lazard in Green Bay, Darius Slayton, who fell off after an awesome rookie year with the Giants, but at least has some traits there that you might bet on, put him in a different position, adjust his route tree a little bit. Maybe he takes off. He's at least in the mix. Speaking of coming off of big years, Matt Collins timed this perfectly. He used to play with the Raiders, more of a special teams guy with the Dolphins. He's been in McDaniel's system. You know what that looks like. Again, he's not going to change your life offensively, but it's someone who is under the radar, and I think the Patriots can make an easy projection of, we'll bank on this guy coming in, works hard, knows the system. And he could be a depth piece for us as like a number 4 or maybe number 3 for them. Offensive tackle, Jonnu Smith is out there for the Bucs. He is on the wrong side of 30. Again, probably buying a year too late. But for them, if the money works out, you take a flyer and move Trent Brown over to right tackle. Like, I think there is a world in which you could squeeze another good year out of Jonnu Smith. But, he's a player, too, who's been disgruntled from time to time and been through a lot of changes over there in Tampa Bay. Do you want to bring someone in like that and rely on them right away? Who knows? Jermaine Illuminor brought him up last week. He did not make my top 5 for the draft picks when we were picking our favorite Patriots free agent targets, but depth piece at right guard, right tackle, knows the system, improved last year under Patriots like coaching out in Vegas. So that's someone who, most people forget about, rightfully so, but he's not going to cost a ton. And you could definitely plug and play for a couple of starts if Mike Onwenu gets hurt, or your new first-round rookie right tackle if they draft someone like Darnell Wright. Moving over to defense, this isn't corner related, and the tight ends I already talked about. Maybe you could do Hayden Hurst or maybe an Austin Hooper, who I liked, actually a sneaky good year in Tennessee last year. Not going to really get his nose in there in second and third and goal and push the pile with 1 yard left, but receiving threat, reliable veteran you can count on, probably get at a discount. So now moving over to defense, corner. Again, I think they bring back Jonathan Jones. They bank in their own development. Guys like Jack Jones and Marcus Jones. It's not the approach I would take. I would still be calling James Bradbury to see what he's up to come over 1 or 2 year deal, high-end guarantees, plug and play starter. No problem about it. Safety, though, with McCourty retiring, Kyle Duggar entering a contract year, Jabril Peppers still a free agent. Julian Love, I've talked about. Go listen to the last pod, why he's such a fit. Excellent tackler, captain, makes an impact on special teams. He can play single high, not an incredible playmaker, but he'll catch the ball when it's thrown to him. Jordan Poyer with the Bills. He's one of the few, the tops of the top 20 free agents of Pro Football Focus that's actually still available. There's only 7 of them. He's up there. Another plug and play guy, exceptionally smart. He's already said, though, he doesn't want to work in a state that takes half a salary or something in taxes. Having come to New York, Massachusetts is not going to fix that, but someone with all the skills in the world, really high football IQ, incredibly productive. They know him, obviously, from playing twice a year. He has slowed down a little bit and gotten dinged up. But I think if, his market depresses, 1 year deal packed with incentives, you can make it work. And last name I'll leave you with, Nick Scott of the Rams. He's a guy who was undrafted. I actually covered for a brief stint at Penn State, worked his way into being a safety after playing running back early in college, and then made a real impact with the Rams and special teams. And I'm not going to go into kick coverage and punt coverage and overrate that by any means, but I think his makeup as someone who has played in a Super Bowl champion on their defense, learn from a smart coaching staff, has the right character, runs a 4.4, could at least be that rotational piece. I don't know if he's playing in the box as Jabril Peppers. He's not quite as rocked up as Jabril playing down there, but as someone that you could count on in an area where the Patriots obviously really struggled in special teams. Cody Davis also still out there as a core special teamer. They start 5 rookies last year, which got lost in the mix of all the terrible returns and penalties, touchdowns allowed, et cetera, et cether. Anyway, under the radar name, depth piece, I think it would be an easy projection in New England. Does Nick Scott want to come to New England after playing and working and living out in LA? I probably wouldn't, but a name to watch. So the Patriots still have the cap. They still have the cash. They still have the needs. Today was keeping their house in order. They have done that. I like to think we have too here at Pat's Interference. If you have any more mailbag questions, if I didn't get to you, again, just find me on Twitter. I'll answer them there. We'll have another episode later this week. And you better believe that episode of the Pat's Interference podcast will be brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of CLNS Media. Again, go to FanDuel.com right now. This helps me. You want to support the podcast, support the people that support us. It's FanDuel.com/Boston. Claim your $200 bonus after your first $5 bet and deposit. It's all right there. No better way to enjoy March Madness. So until then, until the next big splash, Andrew Callahan, and we'll see you next time.